It was supposed to be the best day of her life. A church full of people. A gown built from her bloodline. A man she believed loved her. Instead, her sister ripped the dress apart with a box cutter. Then stood up at the altar and told 200 guests she was carrying the groom's baby. Zoraida walked out of that church in Seoul holding her dress together with her bare hands. No car, no phone, no plan. Just rain and a ruined gown and the kind of silence that comes after everything you believed turns out to be a lie. She stepped off the curb without looking. A black sedan stopped 3 inches from her knees. The man who stepped out had been looking for her since she was 9 years old. The question is, why? Before we begin, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. And if this story hits you the way I think it will, subscribe and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss what's coming next. The mirror told Zoraida she was beautiful. She stood in the bridal suite of Yoido Full Gospel Church in Seoul, turning slowly under a chandelier that scattered gold across the ceiling. Her gown had taken 7 months to build. A tailor in Accra had stitched it by hand. Ivory silk with golden kente patterns climbing her torso like vines. Cowrie shells lined the hem. Glass beads caught the light like fallen stars. She pressed her palm flat against her stomach and breathed. Today she would become a wife. Today every broken promise and sleepless night would dissolve. Malachi loved her. He'd said so. She'd believed him because believing was easier than standing in silence. The door opened behind her. "Let me fix your train, Z." Sola's voice was warm, honeyed, the way it always was right before the knife. Zoraida watched her younger sister in the mirror. 23 years old, 5 years younger, 4 inches shorter, carrying a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She wore a lavender bridesmaid dress she'd complained about for 3 weeks. Too plain, too modest, too much like something a backup singer would wear. "You don't have to," Zoraida said softly. "Mama already steamed it." "I want to. You're my sister." Sola knelt behind her, gathering the fabric. "Everything has to be perfect." Zoraida closed her eyes. She didn't see the blade. It was a box cutter. Small, silver, hidden in the cup of Sola's palm like a secret she'd been carrying since birth. One clean stroke from hip to hem. The sound was almost gentle, thread releasing thread. The satin parted like skin. The kente pattern tore apart in a jagged diagonal that shattered the golden vines. Zoraida felt it before she understood it. A rush of cool air against her left thigh. The sudden lightness of fabric falling away. She looked down. The gown was destroyed. Not damaged, not fixable. Destroyed. The slash ran from her hip bone to the floor. The lining was exposed. The boning was exposed. 7 months of love and labor. Open, like a wound. Sola stood. She didn't run. She didn't apologize. She looked at the ruin she'd made with the calm of a woman who'd been planning this since she first learned the word jealousy. "Oops," she whispered. Zoraida couldn't speak. Her hands trembled. She gathered the torn fabric against her body, pressing shredded satin to skin as if pressure alone could undo what had been done. Her mother burst through the door, saw the gown, let out a scream that shook the walls. "I didn't do anything," Sola said calmly. She caught it on the door handle. There was no time. 12 minutes to the ceremony. The guests were seated. The organist was playing. Zoraida had no choice but to walk that aisle, clutching the ruins of her heritage against her body, her left hand pinning torn satin to her thigh like a woman holding herself together by force of will. Every eye saw it. Every mouth whispered. And Sola smiled from the second pew, like a woman who'd already won. But she hadn't won. Not even close. She'd just made the first move in a game she didn't know she was playing. The altar smelled like white lilies and deceit. Zoraida stood before 200 guests with her fingers locked around the torn edge of her gown. The pastor was speaking. Something about covenant. Something about 2 lives joining. His words were distant, muffled, like hearing them through water. She looked at Malachi. He stood across from her in a charcoal suit with a lavender boutonniere that matched Sola's dress. His jaw was set. His eyes were empty. He looked at Zoraida the way a man looks at paperwork he's already decided to file. Not with love, not with pity, with boredom. That should have been her warning. It wasn't. The warning came next. If anyone here has reason why these two should not be joined, the pastor said, speak now or forever. Hold your peace. Silence. A cough. The rustle of programs. Then a chair scraped backward. Sola stood, smoothed her lavender dress, placed one hand on her belly, and spoke with the clear, carrying voice of a woman who'd rehearsed this moment in her bathroom mirror. I'm pregnant, and it's Malachi's. The church didn't gasp. It cracked. 200 people inhaled at once. The sound was like stone splitting. Zoraida's mother collapsed into the pew. The pastor dropped his Bible, and Malachi didn't deny it. He closed his eyes, pinched the bridge of his nose, exhaled with the exhaustion of a man whose secret had arrived on schedule. How long? Zoraida's voice was barely there. 7 months, Sola answered for him, still standing, still smiling. Since the engagement party, he came to my apartment that night, and every week after. 7 months. The same 7 months Zoraida had spent building her gown. Every fitting, every bead, every prayer she'd whispered into that fabric. Malachi had been in her sister's bed. Every text saying, "Can't wait to see you in that dress, babe," typed with fingers that had just left Sola's skin. Zoraida's cousin Delane was on her feet, screaming at Malachi. Her mother was rocking in the pew, hands over her face, making a sound that wasn't crying. It was keening. The raw, ancient sound of a woman watching her family split apart. But Zoraida heard none of it. She was standing in a silence that belonged only to her. A private, airless room where the truth was so large it left no space for sound. She understood, with the kind of clarity that only arrives after everything false has been stripped away, that she had been a transaction from the beginning. Malachi had never loved her. He was marrying her for the valuable land in Gangnam her father had left in her name. A district official named Vance had rigged the transfer so the land could only pass through marriage. Malachi was drowning in gambling debt. Vance offered him a deal. Marry the girl. Split the land. Everybody eats. Everybody except Zoraida. And Sola? Sola hadn't seduced Malachi out of desire. She'd done it because she couldn't stand to see her older sister possess something. She didn't. Zoraida turned, walked down the aisle in the opposite direction. The torn gown trailed behind her like a flag of surrender. Sola's voice followed her. Sweet. Cutting. You can keep the dress, Z. I won't need it. He already gave me the ring. Zoraida pushed through the church doors and stepped into the rain. She didn't know it yet. But the person who'd been searching for her for 15 years was parked across the street. And he'd seen everything. The rain fell like a judgment. Her gown was dissolving around her. The satin darkened. The kente threads bled gold into the gutters. Makeup ran in black rivers down her cheeks. Her veil was gone. She didn't remember losing it. She walked. Didn't know where. Heels cracking against wet pavement, torn fabric dragging through puddles and grime behind her. She stepped off the curb without looking. 2 white headlights cut through the rain. Brakes shrieked on wet asphalt. A sleek black Maybach slid to a stop 3 inches from her knees. The rear door opened. He was tall. That was the first thing she noticed. Tall and lean, with a stillness that made the rain seem louder. He wore a black suit. Not a wedding suit. A suit built for power, for boardrooms and backrooms and conversations that decide who lives and who disappears. But his hands were gentle. He shrugged off a $10,000 cashmere overcoat without hesitation and draped it around her shoulders. The weight of it settled over her like armor. She looked up. And Ji-hoon looked at her, the way a man looks at something he's been searching for across every city, every year, every sleepless night for 15 years. Because he had. Zoraida. Her name in his mouth was a key turning in a lock. "Do I know you?" she whispered. "Gwangju. The foster home on Jungo Row. You were 9, I was 11. You shared your lunch with me every day because the older boys stole mine. You told me you were going to be a queen when you grew up." He paused. "I believed you." The memory surfaced like a body from deep water, sudden, gasping, alive. A skinny Korean boy with bruised knuckles and a quiet voice. He used to draw her pictures on scrap paper, horses, castles, a girl with a crown. She remembered the foster home with painful clarity, linoleum floors that smelled like bleach, the narrow cot she shared with a girl named Patience, and the boy who sat alone in the courtyard every day because the older kids had marked him. She'd walked over to him one Monday with half her rice and a boiled egg. "You can't fight if you're hungry," she'd said. He'd looked at her like she'd handed him the whole sky. After that, it was every day. She brought food. He brought drawings. They didn't speak the same language, but they built their own. Gestures and sketches and the kind of trust that only forms between two children who already know the world isn't kind. Then one morning he was gone. Transferred. No warning. No goodbye. She'd walked to the courtyard with her half portion of rice and found his seat empty. At 9 years old, she understood that love could vanish without a sound. Now he stood before her, grown, powerful, soaking in the rain, and the look in his eyes was the same one he'd given her over that first boiled egg. "Jin?" she whispered. "Ji-hoon, now." A faint smile. "I kept the drawings." Here's what Zoraida didn't know about Ji-hoon. He controlled shipping routes across 3 continents. He'd buried rivals and built empires. His name made powerful men flinch. And he had spent the last 15 years looking for the girl who shared her lunch with a bruised Korean boy in Gwangju. He looked at her in that shattered gown and said the words that changed everything. "I'll burn the world that dared to dress you in shame." He opened the car door wider. She stepped inside. The Maybach pulled away from the church like a black tide swallowing the past. She didn't know where he was taking her. She didn't care. Whatever came next couldn't be worse than what she'd left behind. She was wrong about that. But not in the way she expected. Ji-hoon's penthouse sat on the 52nd floor of a tower in Gangnam that didn't appear on any public registry. The elevator needed a biometric scan, a 6-digit rotating code, and Ji-hoon's physical presence. The doors opened into a space that was equal parts museum and fortress, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul and the distant silhouette of Namsan Tower, polished concrete floors, hand-woven Korean rugs, walls lined with art that cost more than most people's homes. Zoraida sat on a leather sofa the color of midnight, Ji-hoon's coat around her shoulders, her destroyed gown pooling at her feet like shed skin. She hadn't spoken since the car. Her eyes were fixed on the middle distance, that hollow, 1,000-yard stare of a person whose brain is still catching up to the scale of the betrayal. Ji-hoon didn't push. He set a cup of ginger tea beside her, sat in the armchair across the room, and waited. 20 minutes passed. "Why did you find me?" Her voice was flat. "Dead. I never stopped looking." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have." She turned to look at him. No warmth, no gratitude. Just the cold assessment of a woman who'd just been destroyed by the last man she trusted. "I don't know you," she said. "I knew a boy. I don't know the man." Ji-hoon nodded. Didn't argue. Didn't plead. "Then let me show you." He walked to a door at the far end of the penthouse. Inside was a windowless room lined with screens, financial records, property deeds, phone transcripts, surveillance footage, all organized with a precision that would make an intelligence agency jealous. "This," Ji-hoon said, pulling up a face on the central screen, "is the man who stole your inheritance." Vance Leroy Whitfield, senior official in Seoul's District Land Registry. 58 years old, thinning hair, the bloated face of a man who'd been eating off corruption for decades. Your father's will was clean, Ji-hoon said. The land was yours. Free and clear. No conditions. Vance changed the transfer documents after your father died. He added a marriage clause that locked you out unless you married. Then he found Malachi, drowning in gambling debt, and offered him a deal. Marry the girl, get access to the deed, split the sale. Zoraida's hands were shaking. Everything? The whole engagement was manufactured. First dinner to the proposal. Vance was the architect. The rage that moved through Zoraida wasn't hot, it was cold, glacial. The fury of a woman who understood, for the first time, that she had never been loved. She had been managed. She thought of every tender moment. Malachi bringing orchids because she'd mentioned her mother grew them. The sunset proposal on the bridge, his hand in hers at church every Sunday. Every gesture rehearsed, every softness a strategy. She'd mistaken performance for love because she'd wanted it to be real. That was the last time she'd make that mistake. Ji-hoon didn't wait for permission. Within 72 hours, an anonymous tip triggered a structural audit of Vance's office. 17 years of falsified records, misappropriated funds, forged transfers affecting dozens of families. The audit became a federal investigation. Vance's accounts were frozen, his assets seized, his name on the front page under words like fraud and life sentence. Zoraida watched the news from the penthouse sofa. The tea had gone cold in her hands. The land is yours again, Ji-hoon said from the doorway. No conditions, no clause, just yours. She didn't thank him. She wasn't ready. But she looked at him. Really, looked at him. For the first time since the car. And something in the permafrost of her chest shifted. Just slightly. Just enough. That shift scared her more than the betrayal had. Because trusting again meant she could be broken again. And she wasn't sure she had enough left to survive it twice. The chemistry announced itself on US. A Tuesday evening, uninvited. Ji-hoon had arranged dinner on the penthouse terrace. Not romantic, he said, practical. They needed to talk about next steps, about the people still circling her name. But the conversation drifted. You used to draw me castles, Zoraida said, her chin resting on her hand. Seoul's lights making constellations behind her. On the back of cereal boxes, you said every queen needed a castle, and since nobody was going to build me one, you'd draw me 100. Ji-hoon's chopsticks paused over the japchae. You remember that? I remember everything about that year. You were the only person who was kind to me. He set his chopsticks down. You were the only person who was kind to me. The air between them thickened. Something too fragile to name, too powerful to ignore. She felt it in her sternum, he felt it in his hands. Neither of them moved. I'm not ready, she said quietly. I know. I might never be. I know that too. The simplicity of that? No. Pressure, no performance of hurt. Cracked a door she'd bolted shut at the altar. She didn't walk through it, but she stopped bracing against it. What happened the next morning changed the temperature between them entirely. Ji-hoon showed her the surveillance photos. Sola hadn't wasted any time. Within a week of the ruined wedding, she'd moved into Malachi's apartment, registered for wedding gifts at 3 stores, and started shopping for a replacement gown at Maison de Lumière, the most exclusive bridal boutique in Cheongdam-dong. She's shopping for a dress, Zoraida said flatly. She destroyed mine, and now she's shopping for hers. Yes. That store costs a fortune. Where's she getting the money? Ji-hoon's expression didn't change. She's not. I bought the building this morning. Maison de Lumière is now a subsidiary of Hanul Holdings. Zoraida stared. You bought a bridal boutique. I bought the building that contains a bridal boutique. There's a distinction. What are you going to do with it? Ji-hoon straightened his cufflinks. Would you like to watch? Sola arrived at noon. Cab she couldn't afford. Sunglasses stolen from Zoraida's apartment. She swept into the store like a woman who believed the world owed her a spotlight. 7 gowns, selfies to Malachi, captions like, "Your future wife looks divine." She was zipping herself into an $8,000 Vera Wang when the lights went out. 30 seconds later, they came back on. The store was empty. Not the people. The garments. Every rack. Every mannequin. Every hanger. Every veil, shoe, sash, and pin. Ji-hoon's team had stripped the store bare in under a minute. The precision of men who'd done far more dangerous work. Sola stumbled out of the dressing room in her underwear, clutching the Vera Wang to her chest. Empty white room. Mirrors reflecting nothing. Then the smoke alarm went off. In the alley behind the store, a controlled burn was eating through a pile of clothing. Not the sun. In store's inventory. Sola's own wardrobe, collected from Malachi's apartment that morning through a window she'd left open. Every blouse. Every heel. Every item bought with money that was never hers. She ran outside barefoot in the stolen Vera Wang and watched her clothes burn. The paparazzi, tipped off by an anonymous call, captured every frame. By nightfall, the photos were everywhere. Sola, barefoot, screaming, in a stolen wedding dress, watching her life go up in smoke. A mirror to Zoraida's wedding day. A mirror to the shame. But here's the difference. Zoraida had walked out of that church holding her gown together with quiet dignity. No screaming, no spectacle. She'd carried the humiliation like a wound. Privately, painfully, with grace. Sola had no such grace. She called Malachi 17 times, called her mother, called her friends, called a lawyer. Nobody answered. Sol had seen the photos. Sol had chosen its side. Zoraida watched from the penthouse. And for the first time in weeks, she exhaled. But the people who'd hurt her weren't finished. And Ji-hoon knew it. Because Sola and Malachi were puppets. The real hand holding the strings was still out there, and she was about to make a move that would put Zoraida's life in danger. Odessa Monroe Baptiste had perfected the art of cruelty disguised as class. Malachi's mother sat at the center of Seoul's elite social web like a spider in couture. President of 3 charity boards, patron of the arts, host of the annual Chrysanthemum Gala, the event that separated the powerful from the pretenders. She wore pearls the way other women wore armor. She never raised her voice. She never needed to. When Odessa whispered, empires leaned in. She'd orchestrated everything. Vance was her tool, a corrupt bureaucrat she'd found and leveraged. Malachi was her weapon, a gambling addict she'd aimed at Zoraida's inheritance. Even Sola's affair had been Odessa's gardening, a comment here, an encouragement there, nurturing the younger sister's jealousy until it bloomed into betrayal. Odessa wanted one thing, control. Zoraida was too strong, too independent. A woman like that, holding valuable land, was a threat. Better to marry her to a man Odessa owned. Drain the assets. Discard the husk. But Ji-hoon had disrupted the plan, and Odessa did not tolerate disruptions. She made the call on a Thursday afternoon from the leather chair in her private study. Antique desk in front of her. Crystal lamp casting warm light across her hands. I need a problem removed. The man on the other end quoted a price. Odessa transferred $50,000 from a shell account linked to one of her charities. She didn't know Ji-hoon's network intercepted the call 4 seconds after it was placed. The Chrysanthemum Gala fell on the first Saturday of November. The grand ballroom of the Shilla Seoul. Gilded ceiling, crystal chandeliers, 400 of Seoul's most influential people drinking champagne and pretending to be generous. Odessa stood at the podium in a floor-length emerald gown. Annual speech about community and compassion. Warm applause, practiced smiles. Then the doors opened. A man in a dark suit walked down the center aisle carrying a silver briefcase. Calm, unhurried, very specific instructions. He placed the briefcase on the stage at Odessa's feet, unlatched it, stepped back. Inside, neatly stacked and banded, $50,000 in cash. On top of the money, a printed transcript. Odessa's voice. Odessa's words. Hiring a hitman to eliminate Zoraida. The room went silent. The screens above the stage, the ones that had been showing Odessa's charity photos, switched to a new slideshow. Financial records. Wire transfers. Shell companies. A paper trail linking Odessa to organized crime, money laundering, and a murder contract on Zoraida's life. 400 people watched Odessa's empire crumble in real time. She didn't scream, didn't faint. She stood at that podium with the rigid composure of a woman who understood the game was over. And the game had been everything. The police arrived before dessert. 2 plainclothes detectives. Practiced courtesy. Emerald gown. Handcuffs. She walked between them with her chin raised and her pearls gleaming. The click of her heels on marble was the last sound before the doors closed. By morning, Odessa was on the front page of every paper in Seoul. Emerald gown. Federal agents. Zoraida saw the photos on Ji-hoon's screen and felt nothing. Not satisfaction. Not relief. Just the hollow echo of a woman who was starting to understand how many hands had been moving her life, and how deep the rot had grown while she was busy believing she was loved. Ji-hoon had dismantled 2 of the 3 people who'd tried to destroy her, but the most dangerous one was still hidden, and he was closer than either of them knew. Zoraida found the room on a Wednesday. Ji-hoon was on an encrypted call, pacing the study, jaw set, voice low. She'd been living in the penthouse for 6 weeks. Her own room, her own key. She'd started to breathe again, started to notice things about him. The way he remembered she liked honey in her tea, not sugar. The way he never entered her room without knocking, the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching, an expression so careful and unguarded it made her chest ache. She'd started to trust him. That was her mistake. Not because he wasn't trustworthy, but because trust made her careless. And careless people open doors they shouldn't. The room was behind the war room. A secondary entrance she'd assumed was a closet. Small, windowless, every wall covered. Photographs. Dozens. Zoraida at 19, crossing a college campus. Zoraida at 22, laughing in a cafe. Zoraida at 25, in a yellow sundress outside her mother's house. Surveillance shots, candids, telephoto lenses, rooftops and parked cars. 10 years of watching. Her blood went cold. She backed out, walked to the living room, sat on the sofa, and when Ji-hoon came out of his meeting, she was waiting with the stillness of a woman holding a grenade. The room behind the war room. Ji-hoon stopped. You've been watching me. For 10 years. Zoraida. You tracked me. Photographed me. Followed my life like a case file. Her voice was shaking. What am I to you? A project? A possession? Another man who decided to own me without asking? It wasn't... Don't tell me it wasn't like that. I just walked out of a marriage to a man who treated me like property. I won't walk into another cage with nicer furniture. Ji-hoon stood still. His face showed nothing, but his hands were trembling. I was trying to protect you. From what? From the people circling you. Vance? Odessa. I've known about them for 3 years. I was looking for the right time. The right time to what? Appear out of nowhere like some dark prince? Make me grateful? Make me yours? Something cracked behind his composure. Not anger, grief. The grief of a man who'd spent 15 years building a bridge to someone, and just watched her set it on fire. I wasn't trying to own you. I was keeping a promise I made to myself at 11 years old, that if I ever found you again, no one would hurt you. That's all. That's always been all. Then why didn't you ask me? Why didn't you come to my door and tell me the truth? Because that's what every man who's ever hurt me did. He decided on his own what I needed. The words landed like blows. Ji-hoon absorbed them. Something behind his eyes dimmed. "If you want to leave," he said, "I won't stop you." "I know you won't, because I'm not asking permission." She packed the small bag she'd arrived with, left his coat folded on the bed, walked out of the penthouse, through the lobby, into the Seoul night. She didn't look back. Ji-hoon watched her leave on the security monitor. Didn't follow. Closed his eyes. And for the first time in 15 years, the man who'd built an empire on discipline let a single tear fall. She thought she was walking toward freedom. She was walking straight into a trap. Silas Park had been Ji-hoon's lieutenant for 11 years. He'd been betraying him for 3. It started small. Skimmed percentages, redirected shipments, information sold to competitors at prices that felt like pocket change. But ambition is a parasite. And Silas had been feeding it for years. When Ji-hoon got distracted by a woman in a torn wedding dress, Silas saw his opening. He found Malachi in a basement poker room, drowning in bourbon and debt. "Your woman is living with my boss." "She's not my woman," Malachi slurred. "The land's still in her name, and Ji-hoon is going to marry her. When he does, that land becomes untouchable." Silas leaned forward. "Bring her to me. Ji-hoon comes running. I take his territory. Your debts disappear. Everyone gets what they deserve." What nobody knew, not Zoraida, not Ji-hoon, not even Malachi, was that Silas had been the invisible hand all along. He'd fed Vance the information about the will. He'd pointed Odessa toward the hitman. Every villain had been his puppet. Because the real target was never Zoraida. It was Ji-hoon. They took Zoraida on her second night alone. She was walking back to the Goshuan she'd checked into, a concrete box near Yeongdongpo Station, broken heater, a door that only locked from the outside. She never saw the van, never heard the footsteps. 1 second she was reaching for her key card. The next, a hood over her head, hands around her arms, the chemical taste of chloroform. She woke in a shipyard, corrugated steel ceiling, the smell of diesel and brine. She was tied to a chair in the center of a warehouse the size of a cathedral. Shipping containers stacked 3 high. Industrial lights casting harsh white pools. Shadows between the containers so dark they looked solid. Malachi stood to her left, fidgeting, sweating. Couldn't meet her eyes. The charcoal wedding suit was gone. Rumpled jeans, stained jacket. The arrogant jaw was soft with fear. He kept wiping his palms on his thighs. He was a man who'd agreed to something he didn't understand, and the reality was settling over him like cement. Silas stood to her right, calm, smiling, phone in hand, weight on one hip, eyes bright with the energy of a man who believed he was about to win. "Comfortable?" Silas asked. Zoraida looked at him with the quiet fury of a woman who'd survived worse. "When Ji-hoon finds you," she said, "he won't be polite." Silas laughed. "I'm counting on it." He was right to count on it, but he was wrong about what would happen when Ji-hoon arrived. Ji-hoon reached the shipyard at 11 minutes past midnight. He didn't arrive as the businessman. He arrived as the Mafia boss. The tailored suit was gone. Black tactical clothing that moved with his body like a second skin. His face, usually composed, controlled, was stripped of pretense. What remained was something older, something primal. The face of a man who'd grown up in violence and never fully left it behind. He brought 12 men. Silas had 26. It wasn't a fair fight. It was never meant to be. Ji-hoon's men weren't foot soldiers. They were specialists, hand-selected over a decade for exactly this kind of work. They moved through the shipyard like smoke. Perimeter guards disabled in 4 minutes. Power cut in 6. Main doors breached in 8. The warehouse erupted. Ji-hoon moved through the chaos with the terrifying calm of a man trained to function in violence, the way other men function in boardrooms. No shouting. No hesitation. each movement deliberate, each strike measured, surgical, not savage. Silas ran. Ji-hoon let him. He had people at every exit. In the center of the warehouse, Malachi stood behind Zoraida's chair, shaking hands, a gun pressed to her temple that he clearly didn't know how to use. "Stay back," his voice cracked. "I'll do it. I swear." Ji-hoon stopped 10 feet away, looked at Malachi, not with anger, with pity. "You won't." "I will." "You're a weak man, Malachi. You've always been a weak man. You don't have the conviction to pull that trigger. You don't have the conviction to do anything except run from consequences." Malachi's hand trembled. The gun wavered. Zoraida moved. A simple technique. Something Ji-hoon had taught her during one of their quiet evenings. Framed as casual self-defense, delivered with the precision of a man who knew exactly what she might face. She dropped her weight, twisted her torso, drove her elbow into Malachi's solar plexus hard enough to fold him in half. The gun hit the floor. Malachi collapsed. Ji-hoon knelt in front of her, pulled a knife from his belt, cut the ropes from her wrists. Steady hands. Sure hands. "Are you hurt?" "No." "Are you certain?" She took his face in her hands. His skin was warm. Blood on his knuckles. A cut above his left eyebrow. An exhaustion in his eyes that went deeper than the body. She looked at him the way she hadn't allowed herself to look at him since the terrace. Fully. Openly. Without armor. He wasn't trying to own her. He wasn't performing protection for the reward of possession. He was a boy from Gwangju who'd made a promise to a girl who shared her rice, and he'd spent his whole adult life keeping it. Imperfectly, obsessively, from too far away. But with a faithfulness most people couldn't sustain for a week. "I'm certain," she whispered. Ji-hoon didn't kill Malachi. 3 phone calls. Within the hour, Malachi was collected by the men he owed gambling debts to. $2 million worth. They'd been looking for him for a long time. They were not kind men. Silas was found crouching behind a shipping container at the east exit. 2 of Ji-hoon's men had been standing there for 20 minutes, waiting patiently. He was turned over to Ji-hoon's inner council. No courtroom, no mercy, and Sola. She was hiding on a rusted catwalk on the warehouse's upper level. Malachi had brought her. Not for protection, because Sola had insisted on watching Zoraida get brought down to size. She was brought down from the catwalk instead, escorted to a waiting car. Ji-hoon's lawyers had the documents ready. By morning, Sola would be stripped of every legal connection to Zoraida's family. Removed from the will. Barred from the estate. Exiled from the family name. She'd leave Seoul with nothing. No money, no name, no sister. Sola screamed the entire way to the car. Zoraida didn't watch. She was done looking backward. The garden was hidden behind a wall of jasmine. It sat on a private acre in the hills above Bukhansan, on the northern edge of Seoul. Accessible through a single iron gate, a cobblestone path lined with magnolia trees. Ji-hoon had bought the land 4 years ago and spent every year since turning it into something that wasn't a display of wealth. It was a sanctuary. Peonies, Zoraida's favorite, planted in clusters of white and blush that glowed in the moonlight. Persimmon trees imported from Gwangju, branches heavy with fruit the color of sunset. A stone bench near a reflecting pool where koi moved like living brush strokes. And at the center, a single cherry blossom tree with tiny lights strung through its branches like captured stars. "When did you build this?" Zoraida asked. "The year I found you again." "You didn't find me. You were watching me." "Yes." "Why didn't you just come to me? Knock on my door? Say, 'I'm Jin. We grew up together. I've been thinking about you for 15 years. Ji-hoon was quiet for a long time. "Because I'm not a safe man, Zoraida. My world isn't safe. I knew if I walked into your life, my world would follow. I wanted to protect you from a distance, be the wall you never knew was there. But it followed you anyway." "Yes. And I'm sorry for that." The night air carried jasmine and persimmon and fresh earth. The cherry blossom. Lights cast a warm glow across their faces. Somewhere in Seoul, the wreckage of the last 2 months was still burning. Court proceedings and headlines and the slow machinery of justice. But here, in this garden, the world was quiet. "The photos scared me," Zoraida said. "They should have. They made me feel hunted." "I understand. But they also meant someone was thinking about me. For 10 years, someone was thinking about me." Her voice broke. She pressed her fingers to her lips. "I've never had that." Ji-hoon didn't move, hands at his sides, eyes on her face, waiting. Because waiting was the only language he'd ever learned that meant love. "I don't forgive you," she said. "I know. Not yet." He looked at her. "But I understand you. I understand the boy who drew me castles, the man who burned the world that hurt me. And I understand you built this garden because you didn't know how to say what you felt, so you planted it instead." The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full. 15 years, 1,000 drawings, a shared lunch in Gwangju, fire and ruin, and the long, patient ache of a love that had been growing in darkness, waiting for light. Zoraida reached for him. Her fingers found the lapel of his jacket. She pulled. Gently, firmly. Ji-hoon came to her the way the tide comes to shore. Inevitable, unhurried, as if this had always been the direction he was moving. His hand found the curve of her jaw. Her fingers rose to the back of his neck. Under the cherry blossom lights, with the moon low and full above the magnolias, they kissed. Not a dramatic kiss. Not the kind stories used for fireworks and swelling orchestras. It was deep, grounding. The kiss of two people broken by different hands and healed in the same fire. "I see you. I know you. I choose you." When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. "No more walls. No more walls. No more watching from a distance. No more distance." She smiled. The first real smile since the wedding. Not a performance. Not a mask. The genuine expression of a woman who'd walked through fire and found someone standing on the other side. "Build me a castle, Jin." He smiled back. Rare, quiet, devastating. "I already did." He took her hand, led her to the stone bench beside the reflecting pool. They sat side by side, shoulders touching, watching the koi drift beneath the surface. The cherry blossom lights swayed in the breeze. "What happens now?" she asked. "Whatever you want. I want to start from here. This garden, this bench, this version of us, with everything we've been through still attached. Then we start from here. And the watching? I'll sit beside you instead." She leaned into him. He wrapped his arm around her shoulders with the care of a man holding something he'd waited a lifetime to touch. The garden hummed with insects and water and wind through magnolia leaves. The moon poured its light across them like a blessing neither had asked for. Zoraida closed her eyes. For the first time in as long as she could remember, she wasn't bracing for impact. Wasn't calculating the next betrayal. Wasn't holding herself together with clenched fists. She was sitting in a garden with a man who'd planted peonies because he remembered they were her favorite. And she was breathing. And the breathing was enough. If this story touched you, let me know in the comments. Where are you watching from? Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a story. I'll see you in the next one.